sa pintura mo.
Nakasanayan na kasi bossing
Hindi lang dapat sa nakasanayan. Dito ka na sa Megaling. Davis Mega Krill 500 white. Ito ang makatawan. Maputi. Hindi maamoy.
Wow, magaling talaga. Give me 5.
Give me 500. Davis Mega Krill 500 white.
Ozan.
Ha? Kaya pagdating sa pinturang puti, lumipat na sa Davis Mega Krill 500 white. Basta pintura, hanapin ang tatak Davis. Davis Sun and Rain Elastomeric Paint. Nababanat sa init, bumabalik sa lamig. 100% acrylic, di basta kumukupas. Marami pang kulay na mapagpipilian. Davis Sun and Rain. Para sa akin, ang bossing sa Elastomeric Paint. Basta pintura, hanapin ang tatak Davis.
Choosing the right color scheme can completely transform your living space. Today, Davis Paints will give you tips on how to choose your desired color scheme. Learning how to use the color wheel can help you identify the color scheme that will fit your space. There are 3 types of color scheme to remember. First is the monochromatic color scheme, which uses different tones of the same color. Use the darkest tone to create pockets of visual interest in the room. An analogous color scheme uses colors that are next to each other in the color wheel. Create depth and harmony in a space by layering different tints and shades from analogous color groups. A complementary color scheme uses colors that are opposite to each other on the wheel. These colors are bold and high contrast. So, to keep it balanced, assign a dominant color, secondary color, and an accent color. Warm colors like reds, oranges, and yellows make a room feel cozy and intimate. But if you have a small space, cool colors like blues, greens, and purples make it appear larger. For more DIY painting tips, like and subscribe to our pages or visit our website at www.davispaints.com.
Gusto ko yung blue. Yung blue na parang yung sky, pero medyo dark. Nang konti lang. Parang yung mga lobo na tinitinda sa labas ng simbahan pag Sunday. Na pag hindi hinawakan ng mabuti, aakyat din sa blue sky. Ganyan na ganyan yung gusto kong kulay ng kwarto ng anak ko.
Blue ba kamo? Marami kami niyan. And if you don't like blue, choose from over 1,000 other colors and shades in our gallery. Davis Paints. Tunay na makulay.
All right, so hello, and once again, a very happy evening to all of our viewers from Facebook and YouTube Live. Welcome to our show where we get to relax and chat with our favorite architects and, of course, our favorite drinks. So I'm your host for tonight. My name is Raya Zumudio, VP for Operations at UAP Makati. Join me tonight in our second installment of our Globalization and Competitiveness Talks. Last month, nabitin tayo sa usapan, so we heard you, and we're here to continue our live session together with our previous guests as well as a new set of panelists. Ayan, so very exciting. This is the United Architects of the Philippines Makati Chapter, Arquivivo Happy Hour, Going Global Part 2. Ayan, and we are now open. So to kick things off, let's all grab a drink or a light snack and find a cozy spot in our homes. So as for me, since it's almost Christmas, what I have with me is, of course, ayan, puto bumbong. Ayan, kompicho with buko and muscovado. And as for my drink, I have with me a hot cup of chocolate. Wow! Ayan, sarap, diba?
Wow!
Okay, so if you know someone who deserves to have an awesome time this Saturday, mention them in the comment section below. Also, remember to comment your favorite drink below for a chance to win one of our 4 power banks. And like and share this video for a chance to win 1 out of 8 laptop bags. Ayan. Courtesy of our sponsor, DB's. So before we meet our panelists, I'd like to announce our upcoming event. Please do not miss our special event this coming November 27 as we celebrate the Makati Chapter's 44th founding anniversary and new members induction ceremony. So this is featuring our special speakers, none other than Architect Jojo Tolentino of Idea Inc. and Architect Robert Sack, former PR BOA chair. This is 2 CPD points, so make sure to watch out for our registration. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for today, Navy's Paints, Multi-Rich Home Decors Philippines, and of course, Kuisen. Ayan. And with that, without further ado, let us now meet our guest kakwentuhan. So to introduce our first set of panelists tonight, please welcome our dear Makati Chapter Auditor, Architect Cecilia San Diego, aka Mama Cheng.
Thank you, Raya. We're back here tonight. And for our first guest, he has been engaged in the professional practices of the architectural and environmental planning professions for about 4 decades, with his areas of practice relating to consulting and transaction of advisory services for transportation facilities, land reclamation and land and property development proposals, and regulations for the built environment, specifically the formulation of development controls, including land use and building regulations. About 35% of his project involvements were with expatriate professionals from various countries, chiefly the USA, the UK, Germany, Japan, and South Korea. Please welcome former PR BOA Chair, Architect Armando Algi, FUAP ENP.
Hey, salamat Cheng and Raya, and thanks as well to Titus for inviting me over. So the topic that was given to me involves laws, policies, and treaties. If you remember in the first meeting that we had, that was October 23, what I mentioned specifically was you needed to first really know your own laws, your own policies, probably as a platform, as a stepping stone into international practice. So it's really difficult to go into international practice without knowing your own laws at home. Because that's your foundation. So if you know enough about the laws and development controls and practice laws at home, that gives you more or less an opportunity to try to compare and actually be able to compare foreign practices or foreign situations. So let's go to our first slides. I will try to keep this under 5 minutes. So that's the title, Architectural Laws Policies. This is in the context of globalization and competitiveness. So we go to the first slide. So I won't dwell too much on this. This is a slide that I've been using probably for the last 15 years. But basically what this says is that there is actually a Philippine legal framework. But this is what do you call this, a layman's view of the Philippine legal framework. So on the right panel, you have the Philippine Constitution, and then the laws, and then the stream of regulations. When you have laws, there's a stream of regulations. So you have implementing rules, you have guidelines, you have standards, you have procedural manuals, and you have a lot of other executive issuances that try to interpret the basic law. And then on the left panel, these are what are called interventions. So they could be in the form of court decisions, court orders, executive issuances, particularly to resolve disputes, intergovernment or intragovernment disputes. And then there are others like jurisprudence. What is important about jurisprudence is that it has the effect of changing laws, changing law basically. So when the Supreme Court issues a resolution or a ruling or a decision, that has actually the effect of changing law. And that is why we are watching out very closely for what the Supreme Court will decide on in that case between architects and engineers. Because if they favor the civil engineers, it changes our law. If they favor the architects, it changes the law of the civil engineers. And then up on top, we have interventions like treaties and agreements. Treaties are not normally or nominally ratified by the Senate, Philippine Senate, and then you have agreements which are executive agreements, usually signed since these are trade agreements. Usually it's the Department of Trade and Industry, DTI, that signs on behalf of the Philippine government. So we go to the next slide. So in the case of RA 9266, that's our local professional regulatory law for architects. You have to be familiar or quite familiar with its stream of regulations. So you have your implementing rules and regulations from 2004, the Code of Ethics from 2006, standards of practice, professional practice from 2010, and then the architect's guidelines from 2016. And then there are also resolutions that are periodically promulgated by the Board of Architecture, approved by the PRC, and published in the official gazette. No? If it is not published in the official gazette, it does not actually take full effect. It has to be published and properly disseminated before the regulations or the resolutions can take effect. Next slide, please. Now, there are a lot of key laws and streams of regulations that architects must familiarize themselves with. No? So 1096 is the building code, 9514 the fire code. These are local laws. No? 344 accessibility law, 957 on subdivisions and condominiums, 220 for low-cost housing, socialized, and 386 is the civil code of the Philippines. This is very important because a lot of things concerning property, the usage of property, and even things like easements and so on. Some things that you normally associate with the building code are actually found right there in the civil code. So architects from time to time would have to also look at the civil code. 4566 is the law on contractors contracting. Remember that contracting is a business. It is not the practice of a profession. It is not public service in a way, and that is why contracting was removed from the PRC in the mid 1970s. It was transferred to the DTI. So the view that contracting is a business has been there probably for the last 45 years. And then the PRC law, and then a lot of governance and accountability laws, including graft and corruption, ARTA, which is the red tape law, code of conduct of government officials, and so on. Environmental laws, water and sanitation code, jurisprudence, I mentioned that earlier, treaties as well. But what's quite important are the local government zoning ordinances and special ordinances. Most importantly, these zoning ordinances could have provisions that are stricter than the building code. And if that is the situation where you have a provision under the zoning ordinance that's stricter or more stringent than what is found in the building code, you have to follow the local zoning ordinance, not the building code. But remember that while these local government zoning ordinances and special ordinances can be stricter than the building code, they cannot relax the provisions under the building code. And then you have executive issuances starting from the office of the president all the way down to the offices of the secretaries. And then finally, we have suppletory international and private development controls. What this basically means is that if it is not found in any Philippine law, but if it is found in foreign regulations, then that may be made to apply in Philippine projects. So that is what is meant by suppletory application. If it's not found in Philippine laws or Philippine regulations, Philippine standards, it can apply if it can be found elsewhere. Especially if what you can find in foreign codes or foreign regulations are better or more stringent than what's found in Philippine laws or regulations. Next slide, please. These are some documents that we use for local design. These are standards that we use, 2004 Implementing Rules of the Building Code, the Green Building Code 2015, and design guidelines, DGCS criteria and standards. I'm fortunate to have worked on all three, although my involvement with the Green Building Code was quite peripheral, but in the other two documents, I was quite extensively involved in the making of these two documents. All are DPWH issuances. Next slide, please. So the state policies start from way up with the Philippine Constitution, and then you have treaties and agreements, and these are some of the ones that really affect the practices of the architects. 8981 PRC law, our own law, and then the building code, and then many executive issuances from different agencies. So you have issuances from DPWH, Department of Housing, Urban Development, UTR, Environment, DOLE, DTI, DFA, and so on. These are all executive issuances that we have to look into from time to time because they actually affect our practice or the way we practice. Next slide, please. Now, in the case of the treaties, what are most important for architects would be the 1994 World Trade Organization General Agreement on Trade in Services, WTO GATS. So this has given rise to the APEC Architect and the ASEAN Architect positions. And in the case of the ASEAN, there's a 2007 ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement covering architectural services. That's why we have ASEAN architects already. There are about 100 of them right now. And then we have the Japan-Philippines Economic Partnership Agreement, JIPEPA. There are also provisions there concerning services by architects, nurses, and so on. There are other bilateral, multilateral agreements, but I won't be going into those at this time. So we go to the next slide. In the case of the WTO GATS, there are 4 modes of supply. What's important to remember under WTO GATS is that it has already taken effect as of January 2020. So it's already in place. It's already effective. So there are 4 modes of practice. You can practice here by remote, servicing another client in another country. You can practice by by rather if you require services of another let's say an architect, let's say in Malaysia or Thailand, you can actually go there and work things out with the concerned professional. So there's also the third and fourth modes, which would mean under commercial presence is that you can establish local operations through offices. Let's say if you're from Thailand or Vietnam, you can set up an office in Manila. And then the last mode is requires the actual presence of the professionals. For instance, Vietnamese architects working in Manila or Philippine architects working in Vietnam. So those are 4 modes of practice. So if you need or you want to see more about WTO GATS, you can visit the website of the World Trade Organization. So next slide would be about under GPEPA. So right there on top, trade in goods and services is very much similar to WTO GATS, although this is a bilateral treaty or bilateral agreement. This is basically between the Philippines and Japan. WTO GATS is a multilateral agreement because I think you have about 150, 170 countries involved. But in this case of GPEPA, this is basically a bilateral agreement, Philippines and Japan only. So I think that will be our last slide for this evening. Thank you for listening. Good evening to everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Architect Ali. So that was a very great overview on the importance of architectural laws and state policies that affect local architects here in the Philippines. So we can now proceed, I believe, to our next panelist for today for the first set. Mama Cheng, can you please introduce our guest?
Yes, Soraya, my pleasure. Our second guest has been in the public service for more than 3 decades. After retiring in July 2020 from the National Housing Authority as Group Manager of the Housing Support Services Group, she now serves as a part-time senior lecturer at the University of the Philippines College of Architecture to continue on with her advocacy and mission of preparing the younger generation for the future. Her years of experience in housing development and low-income infrastructures involve planning and design, innovative housing technologies, gender awareness, relocation and resettlement, community development works, as well as urban renewal projects. She's a graduate of the University of Santo Tomas for her bachelor's degree and holds a master's degree on government management from the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. She is the 4th Lady President and 24th National President of the United Architects of the Philippines from 2014 to 2016, and a member of the College of Fellows and the current chair of the Jury of Fellows. She is also an ASEAN architect. Ladies and gentlemen, the current president of IROF Philippines, Architect Maria Benita O. Regala, FUAP, ENP.
Hello, everybody. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation and good evening. I am truly glad to be here with you. But I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but what can I say is that I've been in the public service, as has been said, that I've been there for almost 4 decades. And what have I learned as a government architect? Maybe I should first share that with you. No? Being in government really takes a lot of sacrifices from a person, no? Because as architects and planners, you don't always get to do what you are intending to do, or you don't always get the recommendations that you give to decision makers are not always accepted as they are, no? But having said that, it is always worthwhile, no, to make these recommendations, because you are always putting forth design and ideas into the heads of these decision makers. And if they do so decide to take up a little bit of what you have told them, then I believe that is already a big contribution, no? Tapping their brains or tickling their brains and giving them concepts and ideas to become more innovative in government. Being in government the government actually is it's the regulatory body, no? It's always the policy making, and therefore it really impacts whatever decisions that are made greatly impact on any profession, like architecture. So the laws that have been discussed before are really a product of all these the executive and the legislative branches of government, and therefore whatever contribution the private sector and the academy would put in there are always integrated and consolidated by the government. So my experience in government I would say is very much multifaceted, because it does not just involve planning and design. It's actually involving more on policy making and issuance of standards and regulations, and that's why it's so flexible. No, it's so wide. The scope is so wide, but you have to really have that the heart, no, and the dedication to continue, because to continue serving the public, no, because as you know, being in the bureaucracy is not really very some of you would say being in government would really be not so ideal for some, because of the politics, no, inside the bureaucracy. But having said that, I do believe that what I am today is really a product of my 40 years of public service, no? And architects, I should say, should be encouraged to go inside, no, to work within the bureaucracy, because this is where decisions are made, no, and this is where on a national level ito talaga yung gumagalaw, no. Kaya ako, I would always say to young people, maybe if you want to contribute to society, and we need more architects in government, because you know we are outnumbered. But kahit outnumbered tayo, talagang we are the thinkers actually. We're the innovators, the creators, no? Kaya maganda sana kung makakapasok yung mga arkitekto sa gobyerno. But there are problems, no? Like being in government, you have to really parang matagal bago ka ma-promote. But it's really up to you to, as an individual, as a professional, to seek out opportunities for your professional growth, no? And moving forward, or relating this to the global practice, however, I could say that, honestly say that the Filipino architect is world-class, no? And even those in government are also world-class, no? You might say that, bakit ganun yung ba't ganyan yung gobyerno ngayon, ano? But I don't want to go into politics, but ganun talaga. Every administration, there are unique features, or there are idiosyncrasies of every administration and every president. And this is how you build, no, your character perhaps as a public servant, no? How you create the balance, no? How you create the balance when you serve and you don't always get what you want to do, no? But yun nga, you have to be patient and you have to be committed, no, to work for the public good, no? That has always been my life's mantra, is always working for the common good. And I think, no, globally naman, I think in the global arena, I could say that during my travels when I was president, no, and even after, when I was president of the UAP, I could say talaga that architects are world class, because even when you go out, no, there's always a Filipino architect in every big project in Dubai, in Brunei, in the US. They're everywhere. In the Middle East, our architects are really doing their jobs well. So are we ready? No, there's a question on, are we ready for globalization? I should say yes. No, we're very competitive. we're very ready, no? But as individual professionals, I think we're ready. But I think what the government needs to do in this area would be to introduce or to ensure that safety nets are in place and that sanctions are implemented with regard to foreign practitioners who are practicing illegally here in the Philippines, no? Because big time developers, I would say that many big time developers are getting more foreign architects, and they should partner with a local architects, no? But perhaps I don't really have the figures, but perhaps not all of them are getting the business permits or the permit to practice from the Professional Regulation Commission. But I know that they have to get that permit, no? So I think to protect our Filipino local architects here, these sanctions and these safety nets must be formulated in a much detailed form, no? Because I think we may have all the framework, we may have all the laws, all the framework, and but I think what's lacking are the specific guidelines, no, to guide the practice of foreign practitioners or foreign architects here in the Philippines. So yun, I think yun lang, and that's what I can share. And maybe the PRC or the PR BOA should really look into these areas when, in terms of the when globalization really happens, when it's really happening now, no?
All right.
Yes,
Thank
I
you so
think that's
much.
it. Mm-mm.
All right. Thank you so much, Architect Beth. So a lot of points there to think about. I think we'll be continuing our discussion later during the panel discussion. So thank you very much, Architect Beth, for your service also. So we have another panelist for our first set. Unfortunately, I think he may be having a few technical difficulties. So right now, we will be proceeding with our second set of panelists. All right. And to introduce our second batch of panelists, here is our Makati chapter treasurer, Architect Richie Ongteco.
Thank you, Raya. Moving on to our next speaker, he's an educator, architect designer, curator, and historian. He's the inaugural Associate Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the School of Architecture and concurrently serving as Director of the Social Innovation and Social Entrepreneurship Program and also Professor of Practice in Design Thinking at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. He was the curator of the Philippine Pavilion at the 16th Venice Bienal Arquitectura 2018, which showcased Filipino design and creativity to the global stage. He received his PhD in History of Architecture and Urban Development from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York in 2012. Under a Fulbright Fellowship program, he obtained his Master's of Science Architecture degree from the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio, USA in 2003. Prior to his coming to the US, he received his Professional Bachelor of Science in Architecture and Master of Architecture degrees from the University of the Philippines in 1996 and 2001, respectively. He wrote the book, What Kids Should Know About Filipino Architecture by Adarna Publishing in 2015, and of course, his curatorial masterpiece, The City Who Had Two Navels, Catalog of the Philippine Pavilion at the 16th Venice Arquitectura Bienal 2018, of course, hand in hand with National Commission for Culture and the Arts. A licensed and registered architect in the Philippines, he also runs his multidisciplinary human-centered design consultancy named Taller Kayumangi Brown Workshop, based in New Orleans and Manila, with projects in architecture, interior design, set design, costume design, fashion exhibition, and graphic design. Of course, he has also designed strategies in North America, Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Middle East in the last 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give our warm virtual round of applause for architect Edson G. Cabalfin, PhD, UAP.
Hello everyone. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. It's good morning for me here in New Orleans. It's 5:40 a.m. So I'm drinking coffee, but I'm sending my warm greetings to all of you, and I'd like to thank UAP Makati for the invitation to join you. What I would like to maybe just share my initial thoughts is focusing more on architectural education. As right now, I'm an educator here in New Orleans, here at the School of Architecture at Tulane University. And one thing that I'm also reminded of as we begin to talk about global competitiveness and the Filipino architect, one of the things, of course, that I am maybe an advocate for is to how do we prepare our future architects, how do we prepare our professionals in the future, and it's through education. And one of the things that I am very sort of supportive of is the idea that we all need to learn, and we also need to learn as much as we can. And this means if we're able to expand our horizons, if we're able to expand our thoughts, our learnings, the better. And it's been mentioned that my experience has been that I've studied in the Philippines, and I've also then have obtained my master's and my PhD from abroad, from the United States. And so, like, one of the things that I'm very supportive of is the idea of being able to learn. If you have the opportunity to be able to study abroad, I think that would be great, because it really expands your point of view, your perspective in terms of what is architecture and just the world in general. So which means that if you have that opportunity, and if you're able to also look for those opportunities, I highly recommend it. One of the things that I'm also reminded of in this discussion of global competitiveness is that we also have to remember that in a setting like competitiveness or being in a competition, we have to remember that there will always be winners and there will always be losers. Unfortunately, hindi po tayo lahat maaring maging winners, in the sense na kasi nga it's set up that way. You know, yung global competitiveness, as architect Ali had mentioned before, you know, for example, GATS has set up a context within which then we are in a global stage, and it's no longer a choice, right? Like, we are already all within it. And that then it's really up to us in terms of how we prepare ourselves. And the reason why I also am reminded of the idea of being in global competitiveness means that there are winners and losers. So it's a question of then what do we do if that's the game, right? It's a game that's already set up, and it's a question of, like, how do we prepare and how do we want to participate in that game? And even if the question is like, how would you like to participate if you are in the Philippines and then in the situation of being in the rest of the world? So my analogy here is that of, let's say, looking at the idea of a movie. Kung titingnan po natin ang film, ang movie, for example, meron pong artista, you know, maaring may superstar, megastar, or whatever, you know, merong bida. Pero hindi naman po lahat kailangan maging bida. Dahil meron naman ding mga supporting actors and actresses. And if you look at it, meron din po tayong mga iba't ibang mga professionals also behind the scenes. You know, meron po tayong costume designer, production designer, yung ating pong cameraman, lighting, and so on. And kung titingnan nyo po yun, kung artista lang po ang nandoon, hindi po magagawa ang film, hindi po magagawa ang isang movie. Which means that kailangan po lahat ng professionals na yun, kailangan po lahat ay nagpa-participate. So, hindi po tayo maaring lahat maging bida or maging superstar. However, pwede po tayong maging bahagi pa rin ng, let's say, ng isang production, ng isang film, or in our case, in the production of architecture. So which means that if you are not already thinking that how to participate, then and you're wanting to be a superstar or maybe a star architect, right? Ang suggestion ko po ay kailangan po nating isipin na marami pong paraan din na kung saan ng arkitekto ay maaring mag-participate in the production of architecture, and not necessarily just being the star, because not everyone can be a star, right? And it's okay. That's, I think, also like my point, that it's okay na hindi po lahat kailangan maging bida, right? Or hindi kailangan maging superstar. Again, because there will always be winners and losers. So from my sort of perspective, also in terms of ano po ngayon ang kinalaman ng education, doon ngayon papasok na I think that kailangan for the Philippines then to be globally competitive, then I think we also need to look at how we train and how we educate our architects. And so I think it's high time, in my opinion, na kailangan tingnan po natin ang ating architectural education sa Pilipinas. Meaning that then, mayroon po bang ibang paraan kung saan pwede po ba nating i-train ng mga arkitekto in many different ways, or leading to many different possible pathways for the practice, or if not, the production of architecture. Dahil hindi naman lahat necessarily kailangan isang path lang, right? So that's a question, because of course it will lead to the professional practice of architecture, licensure, and so on. And that's also, of course, like a very complex system. But what I'm advocating for is to look at, would there be different ways of educating architects? And would there be different pathways for the practice of architecture for many people, and for kind of a diverse set of people? And again, from the point of view that I'm teaching here in the US right now, and I've studied in the US, I've seen other schools also in other parts of the world. And what's interesting to see is that if you look at different ways of educating in outside the Philippines, you will realize that there are many different possibilities. And so that's why I'm also thinking that for the Philippines to be competitive, is that then we need to think about some of these other ways and some other pathways to diversify then the way we educate our architects. And so that's my initial thought about the connection between architectural education and how to be globally competitive. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with my fellow esteemed colleagues tonight. So maraming salamat po.
Ayan. So thank you very much, Architect Edson. And thank you for joining us at such an early hour in your time zone. Ayan. So that was a very great set of questions that you asked earlier, sir, that we can reflect on in light of globalization. So how do we want to participate in an increasingly globalized world? Ayan. So thank you very much, sir. And then on to our next panelist, Architect Chio. Could you please introduce our next panelist?
Thanks again, Raya. For our next speaker, she's an alumni of the University of the Santo Tomas who graduated in 1980. She passed the licensure exam in 1981, worked in the office of Leandro V. Locsin until 1983, and then moved to the US, where she earned her license to practice architecture and established Peach Buen Camino Architect, Inc. in Florida. In 2010, she returned to the Philippines and established CC Buen Camino Architect, mentoring young talented architects and working in various corporate social responsibility projects. She's registered with the Florida Board of Architecture, a member of Florida Home Builders Association, National Home Builders Association, Southern Building Code Congress International, National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, American Institute of Architects, and the United Architects of the Philippines. She has judged various design competitions here and abroad. Last year, she was the head judge for the Asian Young Designers Award for the Philippine competition, and one of the judges and mentor for the regional competition held in Malaysia. She served as the executive director for the Commission on Professional Practice of the UAP from 2014 to 2016. In 2014 to 2015, she was a consultant of the PRC tasked with the evaluation of applicants to the ASEAN Architect Registry, holding the registration AA008 as one of the first 40 registered Philippine ASEAN architect. In 2015, she was given the Outstanding Paulinian Alumni Award, the Philippine Institute of Architects Presidential Award in 2014, and was the recipient of the prestigious Patnubay ng Sining at Kalinangan Award for Architecture in 2016 by the City of Manila. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give our warm virtual round of applause for architect Consuelo Peach C. Buencamino, UAP AIA, ASEAN Architect.
Good evening, guys. Sorry na late ako because I came from Cavite and sobrang traffic. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes po. So, buti po nakasama po namin kayo tonight despite the heavy traffic. Actually, we were just talking about it earlier also po, right before this session. Architect Peach, we wanted to ask you about your general views on globalization and architecture. So, having worked both in the US and also in the Philippines, what are your thoughts on globalization po?
My thoughts on globalization as far as the Filipino architect is concerned. First of all, globally, Filipino architects already rule. I don't think there is an architectural firm, a famous architectural firm out there that does not have a Filipino brain behind it. So, as far as capability is concerned, I'm very confident about the capabilities of the Filipino architect. The difference that I see lang between practicing in the States and here, I think yung mindset ng Filipinos is different when they're here in the country. When they're abroad, they immediately take on and excel on the standards and the expectations of that particular country. Case in point, when I came home and started a firm, so siguro because I was practicing in the States for 30 years, so I did not really know how things were done here. All I knew was how I did it when I had a practice in Florida. So a lot of times, merong mga kasi I encourage openness with the staff. And so sometimes they get frustrated siguro. And on one occasion, sinabi nung isa, he got the courage to tell me na ang hirap sa'yo, Architect Peach. You expect the same practice in that you had in the States dito. Iba naman dito. So sabi ko sa kanila, I cannot accept that. Because, people that, Filipinos that go to Saudi Arabia or the States or Europe or anywhere, they always excel. So, what's the difference? Parang anong mindset yon? Bakit ganon? So sabi ko, sige, kung ganon ang thinking nyo, let's do this. Sabi ko, once you get in that door, nasa States kayo. So, ang standards natin, yung standard sa Amerika, I think it's really the mindset of Filipinos that when they are home, when they're in the Philippines, iba yung set ng standards na nilalagay nila sa sarili nila. and yet when they go to a foreign country, they really excel. I have yet to see or know of a Filipino architect in particular that did not excel where they went. So as far as capability is concerned, we are very capable. It's just, the way, I think it's just a mindset. A lot of people dito, what I have encountered in my mentoring, is that ang ultimate goal, parang ang ultimate goal ng mga arkitekto or mga mentoring, mga bata, is to go abroad. Which is in a way sad, it's very sad na ganon, because parang hindi natin na-nurture yung mga talents natin dito sa Pilipinas. So yun, as far as globalization is concerned, I think it's really a mindset. We can be just as competitive at home than if we even went abroad. We just have to give our country a chance.
Yes po. I completely agree po, Architect Peach. Thank you very much for that. I think this is a recurring theme na po. So we've heard that already from Architect Beth earlier na we Filipinos are competitive. So as you mentioned po, maybe we just need that shift in our mindset. Ayan. So on to our next panelist. Again, Architect Chio.
Thank you, Raya. Joining us also tonight as our speaker co-moderator, he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Architecture from the University of Santo Tomas. He has 3 master's degrees, a Master in Architecture, Master's in Urban Planning from the University of Michigan, USA, and a Master's in Architecture concentrating in Classical Architecture and Urban Design from the University of Notre Dame, Indiana, USA. Currently, he teaches architecture at UST, the National University, and the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. A founding member of the Philippine Green Building Council, he is also a 2-time Haligi ng Dangal awardee for architecture from the National Commission on Culture and the Arts in 2017 and 2021. Being the managing partner of Archeon Architects, a 54-person dynamic firm in Makati, his global competitiveness also brought Filipino architecture to the global platform, with projects all over the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, East Timor, UAE, Guam, USA, and Spain, whose projects have also been published in local and international magazines. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give our warm round of applause for UAP Makati's own, Architect Daniel Vicente A. Lichauco, UAP.
Okay. Thank you again, everyone, and I guess I'm Suki na here. First of all, I'm always happy to help and happy to co-moderate today with the different speakers. I just wanted to keep my presentation really short, and I just wanted to wear a different hat, which I wanted to share with you now. One of the things that we do in the office is we are actually planning consultants to the city of Taguig and to the barangay or to Barangay Wakwak in Mandaluyong. And one of our jobs in Barangay Wakwak, and I mentioned this before, was that we actually check building plans before the barangay will issue the barangay permit, right? So if you look at things in terms of regulations, and I think all the speakers spoke about that, and some were fantastic, is that it really boils down to, I guess the question that Peach mentioned and Edson mentioned is, why is it that when we are here in the Philippines, we go to the least common denominator, right? But when we are in the US and we are abroad, we follow the rules. We follow basically what has to be done. And that has always puzzled me, because in the office, we try to train our staff to make sure that they think about everything, they do things properly. And we're not just here to make money, but we're here to actually provide a design service. And the design service is very important. So questions like that, I think I'm looking forward to asking the different speakers on how we can solve this problem, because I totally agree that when we are abroad, right, we follow the rules. Now, is it because we are so sanay with not following the rules in the Philippines that when we go abroad, we know we have to follow the rules because we'll go to jail, we'll get caught if we don't? And maybe that's one of the impetuses for us following the rules when we're abroad, no? And so what is sad is, like, I do agree, is that sometimes we just see the least common denominator. And that is not just in terms of government practice, in private, but also in private practice. And to illustrate that point, I wanted to share with you something that we do for Barangay Wakwak. Right? Let me just share the screen really quick. Where do we do that? Okay. And so, guys, can I share the screen? If it's possible. But I wanted to show you some of the code work we're doing, and the fact that we do healthcare, we're actually very code heavy. And I actually have a department that is basically allows us to just do code reviews for Barangay Wakwak before they issue the barangay permit. No, one of the things we notice is that after the barangay issues the barangay permit, after that occupancy permit, wala nang pakialam the barangay. So no matter the sad part there is, no matter how good the barangay is, right, when it gets back to the municipio, to the local government, then a lot of the things that we catch are sometimes just debt by, and things like that. And maybe that's one of the things also that will make us much more competitive, is the fact that I think starting down from the mindset that the building codes are there for a reason, not to give us a hard time, not so that government officials can make you sit high and ask for money, right? And not because we can make palusot down the road and get things fixed, but they're there because the government regulations, the building codes are there to protect the environment, the built environment, and protect the people that we're designing for. Okay, so cool. Okay, so this is if you can see this, right? This is basically a plan that we got. I took out the name of the architect, but this is the plan that we got to do a code review for Barangay Wakwak. And this is a 50-story condominium that's being built in the barangay. Now check, upon first glance, and everything you see in red and blue are our notations, or the notations from the office. But one of the things you'll notice is that this looks like a parking lot plan, right? But this is actually the plan, the floor plan of the units, right? And what is sad about this is that this group of architects, or these architects, came in, decided they can submit these documents to the barangay and ask for a permit, which of course we rejected straight off the bat. No, aside from that, we are started doing the code reviews on the fire code, dead ends, things like that. And it is something that we're finding ourselves doing much more for Wakwak and beginning to do for the city of Taguig. One of the things that was really, I think, disconcerting is that why is it that our professionals, tayo, are allowing ourselves to produce documents like this, right? And this again goes down to the least common denominator. This again goes down to the fact that baka makalusot and we can get away with it, no? And so just to explain or show you what we normally do, this slide shows that we have to follow, as part of our code review process, and since this is in Mandaluyong, we have to follow the Mandaluyong ordinances, the National Building Code, the Fire Code, then the subdivision ordinances. At this point, it's Wakwak, and then BP 344 and others. No? And one of the things that we do is that we make sure that when we recommend approval of these plans, that we make sure that whoever submits any plan to the barangay follows the rules, right? And which is actually different from an opinion on design, and I wanted to make this very clear, versus an opinion on what the rules should be followed and done. And so what is complex about national codes is that it has to go through the LGU, then the National Building Code, then the Fire Code, then the Subdivision Code if there's one, and then sometimes the Developer Code, like in Bonifacio and the Bonifacio Guidelines, right? And that makes the code work rather complex. And as Architect Boy said kanina, is that we have to follow all of these, no? Which I really appreciated, Boy, that these codes are actually very important. But what is interesting is that if there are discrepancies within the code, what we tell our office is you follow the strictest, right? So as an example, if the National Building Code says 2-meter easement, but the Developer Code says 4-meter easement, we will follow the 4-meter easement, whatever is stricter. And that's what we recommend. And that's what makes Philippine code work, I think, really interesting. No? So just really quick, I think when it boils down to that, and it boils down to questions of how we are or are not competitive, right? It really boils down to how how we work. And this whole idea of makalusot, right, is there. And I'm glad Beth is here because I have a lot of questions for Beth in the government sector, right? Because we're finding ourselves having to teach the government on how to look at the plans properly. We're also finding ourselves sometimes I have meetings with the fire marshals because we ask for variances in some of our hospitals. And so what we're finding out is that it's sometimes also difficult because I guess since we do this work all the time, we already know what we're up against with the different laws and the different codes. No? And so what I just wanted to say is, I totally agree with what the speakers have said so far, but it really boils down to how we behave ourselves as architects in the Philippine setting. Understanding that in the Philippine setting, we have this mindset of, sige, ayusin mo na lang yan, sige, makalusot na lang yan, right? Without really understanding or remembering that these building codes are there to protect people's lives, not to make our jobs harder, not to make our designs uglier, right? But those codes are there for a particular reason. And one particularly bad habit I have is every time I enter a new condo or a new building, I check out the fire exit, right? And then you know, because you know that fire exits have the width required based on the occupant load. And there's this one particular building wherein the fire exit was small na nga. It was like 90 centimeters wide. And then they had two stringers on the side that were 30 centimeters that had basically an effective walking width of 70 centimeters on a fire exit. And I was in this fire exit, I go, oh, I'm going to die if there's a fire in this building. And this is a 24, 25-story building in BC, right? And so I think it boils down to, why doesn't it start from us as practitioners, right? And then from there, making sure that our work is up to code, is up to speed, that we follow the rules that we're so good at when we do things abroad. And ask ourselves, why are other architects nakakalusot? Diba? To this point that maybe we should also start looking at self-regulation and beginning to say that at this point in time, kasi there's no penalties for the errors or the negligence for the architects in the Philippines. And maybe it's about time that we should also start looking at those penalties, and so that we start policing ourselves as a profession. And that's basically it. And that's, I think, how we can become competitive. We're currently doing a hospital in Senegal. And the first thing I did was pull out all the Senegal codes. And then when we found out what the codes are in Senegal, of course, Philippines is much better, right? But then I said, okay, then let's follow the UBC, the Unified Building Code, again, so that we can use that. And I think Architect Boy said about the reference codes, the supplementary application codes are fantastic. I think that's a great line that people should remember, is that supplemental codes are there so that if it's not in our building code, then we can look at other codes that are better than us, better than our codes, and use it as supplemental codes. And we're very happy that that's mentioned also. And so in closing, I'm looking forward to discussion. I have a lot of questions for everybody, right? And so co-moderator means I'm madaldal. And so that's basically what will happen. But again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I just like to present this. Maybe it starts from us. Maybe it starts from us as professionals to say we are providing a service. And so therefore, part of our service is following the laws. And ignorance of the law is not an excuse for failing. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Architect Dan. Such a nice notion to remember that we need to make sure that we follow the rules even when no one's looking. So sometimes here in the Philippines, there's no disincentive to do that because it's easy to get away with it. But yes, that's absolutely true that we have to start by looking at our own practice. How do we carry out our work? All right. So thank you very much, Architect Dan. Now, at this point, we are about to dive into our panel discussion. But before we do, let's have a quick break and enjoy the following performance by our very own Architect June Bayot. So don't go, we'll be right back.
Pasko na naman, ngunit wala ka pa. Hanggang kailan kaya ako maghihintay sa iyo? Bakit ba naman kailangang lumisan pa? Ang tanging hangad ko lang ay makapiling ka. Sana ngayong Pasko ay maalala mo pa rin ako. Hinahanap-hanap pag-ibig mo. At kahit wala ka na, nangangarap at umaasa pa rin ako. Muling makita ka at makasama ka sa araw ng Pasko. Pasko na naman, ngunit wala ka pa. Hanggang kailan kaya ako maghihintay sa iyo? Bakit ba naman kailangang lumisan pa? Ang tanging hangad ko lang ay makapiling ka. Sana ngayong Pasko ay maalala mo pa rin ako. Hinahanap-hanap pag-ibig mo. At kahit wala ka na, nangangarap at umaasa pa rin ako. Muling makita ka at makasama ka sa araw ng Pasko. Sana ngayong Pasko ay maalala mo pa rin ako. Hinahanap-hanap pag-ibig mo. At kahit wala ka na, nangangarap at umaasa pa rin ako. Muling makita ka at makasama ka sa araw ng Pasko.
Alright, and we're back. That was a very heartwarming performance. Ayan, Pasko na talaga sa Pilipinas. So again, to those of you who are watching us now from your homes, please don't forget to comment your favorite drink below and like and share our live video feed for today for a chance to win our prizes. So, alright, joining me tonight are 6 special guests to discuss globalization and architecture. So that includes, of course, Dan Chauko, who will co-moderate tonight. All right. Yeah, so very exciting to have all our guests here. All right. So, Architect Dan, you mentioned earlier that you had a lot of questions for our speakers. All right. So, would you like to kick things off in this session?
Yeah, just first of all, I'd like to let Edson know that your book is sold out in Shopee, right? Which was cheaper. It's like 175, but I just bought it in art books for 225 pesos, right?
Oh, wow.
But it's sold out in Shopee. So you might have to go to art books to pick up the book. And when I go to New Orleans, I'm going to look for you so you can sign my book. Okay?
Thanks, Dad.
Great. And it was really interesting because I didn't know you wrote that. And I didn't even know that was available. So, and I'm a bit avid collector of collecting architecture books written by Filipinos. I think, we should all patronize everybody. So I guess I just had a couple of questions, and maybe I'll start with Edson. Teaching abroad, and I guess your experience in the Philippines, right? is there something, what is the big lesson that you can give the students with regards to the difference that you see in the mindset of the US American student and the Filipino student? Similar to you, I've taught in both places, but I'd like to hear what is the big difference between the Pinoy student and the American student, aside from the fact that the Pinoys don't have all the gadgets and high-speed internet and everything else.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, for asking that question. And I just wanted to let you know that yes, my book is it's actually sold out, and we're in the process of actually the second edition, which I hope will come out sometime in January or February of 2022. So be on the lookout for the second edition of what kids should know about Filipino architecture.
Is
by Adarna Books.
Yeah. Is this something that you think architecture parents should give their kids to read if they don't want their children to become architects?
I think it's I heard from a lot of people also that it's not only for kids, apparently, that people are reading, even adults are reading my books because they said that it's a good way of being introduced to architecture and how maybe, as you said, maybe sometimes you think like, okay, maybe is this the right career path, or maybe this is something that maybe I don't want to do. So depende na kung sinong titingin, kung paano nila titingnan yung sitwasyon din. To go to your question, Dan, I think like one of the things that I was also struck by what Peach was also saying earlier, because I really agree with what Peach was said about the attitude, and that is really like one of the biggest difference that I noticed also teaching here in the US, compared to teaching in the Philippines, and really like the idea that iba ang attitude in terms of mas open siguro ang kanilang attitude, in the sense that they're open to more possibilities, and that then maybe they're not as I don't want to say subservient or they just want to follow, right? But that's one of the big things I think that the architecture education, for example, abroad, are teaching our students, is that they're teaching architects to be leaders, not just to necessarily be followers. And I think that relates also to what Peach was saying earlier about kaya ba natin kasi mag-isip also for ourselves, right? Kaya ba nating mag-isip na hindi lang tayo basta susunod dahil sa susunod lang tayo, right? I mean, that there's also something about being open and also being open to the possibilities. I think the other one, also the one big attitude is that I've seen is that then I think Filipinos, again, I don't want to generalize also, but I've noticed that some of my Filipino students before, nahihiya sila, nahihiyang magtanong. And that's such a big difference in attitude that I see in my students here. Yung mga estudyante ko dito, magtatanong sila at hindi sila mahihiyang magtanong. And I think that's something that relates to what I was saying about being open, and also the attitude that pwede mong questionin. You can question and you can challenge some of these ideas and rules. And at the same time you're also kind of having that independent opinion and the independence of thinking. I think because of for many reasons, some of our Filipino students, for example, nahihiya silang magtanong, and dahil nahihiya silang nahihiyan lumabas na parang hindi sila nag-iisip, or lumabas na actually nag-iisip sila pero lumabas na parang basta sumusunod na lang sila. So it's kind of like that attitude, as you were saying also, Dan, earlier.
Yeah, but is that because they're shy or they're lazy, or we're shy or we're lazy?
I think it's a combination sometimes. Sometimes it's just being shy. Sometimes it's a combination that we are also very lazy, as like you said. Now, not to say that Americans are not lazy. I also have lazy students, right? Hindi nag-iiba. Meron din ganon. It's still also a wide range. Ganon din ang mga estudyante ko sa Pilipinas before. It's a combination. It's a mix.
Yeah, thanks for that, Edson. For architect I guess the same question to you, but now not for the students, but from the people who work in your firm. And I noticed that you had firms abroad, which is a whole different mindset to the Filipinos working in your firm today. What is the big difference in mindset, and what can you do, or what are you doing to begin to change or improve that?
I think, in general, even the construction workers here and abroad, the difference is pride. Parang there's no pride in their work. They don't take pride in the outcome of what they're doing. So, kahit dito, I have a few architect staff, and parang you would think that because they're already licensed for at least 5 years, may certain expectations ka na of their capacity standards. Pero parang to them, they do the job, they do the work, and they say it's finished. And when I take a look at it, parang, Diyos ko naman, ano ba? Di ba? Parang, ano ba kayo? I think it's...
And then, sorry, and then the response would be, okay lang ho ma'am, ayusin ko na lang.
Oh, yun. When the first year that I was here, I had I bought a house and renovated it. So, nung painting na, just to give you an example, nung painting na, I was walking through it and I saw a wall na may pako. Pinintahan yung pako. So sabi ko, bakit niyo pinintahan yung pako? As, sige po ma'am, ulitin na lang namin. So the next day, tinignan ko ulit, tinanggal yung pako pero may butas. Hindi minasilya yung pako, pinintahan yung butas. So sabi ko, bakit niyo sige po ma'am, mamasilyahin na lang namin. That's what I mean. Na they don't, like the painters, don't take pride in being painters. You know, they don't care. They don't care about, basta napintahan ko yung wall, kung ano may itsura niyan, napintahan na. And the same, I think, it's a Filipino mindset, which is so bad talaga. And so sorry that that ganon tayo, and I'll just be blunt. A lot of people might get mad at me, but that is a frustration that I have because I know we can do more, and that if we put our minds to it, I think it's the professionalism. Some architecture students and graduates and architects, young architects, don't know the meaning of professionalism. You know, and architecture is supposed to be a gentleman's profession. So first and foremost, yung professionalism should be up there. And the other thing is, I think it's true na mahiyain ang mga Pilipino. At the same time, mayabang. Diba? Parang mahiyain sila. Like, my staff also, I encourage them to be brave, to answer me if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, because I also want to learn from you. But they don't say anything kasi they're so afraid that what they might say might be wrong and they might be tagged stupid. Diba? Parang ganon. Pero sabi ko, but you will never know. Better you are stupid with me so I can correct you than you're stupid outside. Diba? Right. But parang ganon. Walang what I find sa America, they take pride in what they do. They claim it. They claim their work. So if you're critical with their work, they're ready to jump on you and defend what they did and prove you wrong. Dito, parang mali ang ginawa mo. O sige po, ulitin ko na lang. Hindi, right. Hindi, because they don't claim it. They don't, anong mali? Diba? Dapat ganon. Anong mali? Hindi mali yan. But hindi, dito kasi, just get it done. I think, there's no pride. There's no pride in what they do. And sayang talaga. The difference between the difference between our country and the first world country is not that we are poor financially or economically. It's that we are poor in building our character. Parang dadaanin parati sa biro o kaya kung sino yung magiging critical, iinsultuhin. Yung mga ganon, they don't take critical comments very well. The other thing is, yun nga, yung mindset. We want to be globally competitive. And one of the basic items for professionals is the CPD program. Pero, sasabihin ng mga Pilipino, ba't ako magsi-CPD? Magaling na ako, parang, I found it so funny na some people are suggesting that if you are practicing architect, then your experience while practicing is your CPD. And that it should be acknowledged. That's so ridiculous. Parang, ano ba yun, di ba? But, to kill the CPD program just because I think they're just lazy to attend it, maybe the CPD program that we have set up in the Philippines is not hindi nila masyadong gusto. But it's not the CPD program that's wrong. The CPD itself that's wrong. It's probably the implementation. And that's how we can be globally competitive. But it's shut down, di ba? It's like evil. So, parang di ko maintindihan yung mga you want to be globally competitive, but you don't want to put in the work to be one.
Yeah, maybe we can ask, sorry, can we ask Architect Ali, since you brought it up, on the CPD points, Architect Boy? Right? And I know you're also instrumental in part of that development. How do you see that program progressing? Because there is a lot of pushback from the professionals. Diba? I agree with Peach. It says, minsan tama, they say, what do we need this for? And without understanding that if you stop learning, you kind of die. Diba? So it's my philosophy. Architect Boy?
Well, two things. I'd like to address what Peach mentioned earlier. Because it's actually in the law, professional work experience can be granted credit under the CPD law. So it's actually a very sensitive matter. So what exactly in one's professional experience can qualify as something that could be awarded CPD credits. So I'm not really sure if the CPD Council has come up with probably detailed ways of quantifying or actually assessing what exactly in professional work experience should qualify for CPD credits. But going back to CPD, what's important in CPD is that there should be a way of measuring how much the CPD taker is able to absorb. So, and that usually is in the form of either an interview at the end of the session or probably an examination, a written examination. Or something that could be taken on a computer, responded to, answered by a computer. So those things, when you take CPD, there has to be a parallel way of finding out exactly how much you are able to absorb. So we need testing for CPD.
Okay. And for Architect Beth, I was really, first of all, I just like to confess, the more we work with the public sector, the more respect I have for people who actually work in government, right? In the beginning, I said, walang alam yan, right? But then I've changed my mind after meeting a lot of different people. But sadly, I think that on the public sector side, there is also a lot of shortage in terms of experience, in terms of implementation and interpretation of the laws. And maybe I'd like to ask you, what did you see the shortcomings were in the government sector, and what do you think we can do to also help that? Maybe there should be CPD points, special CPD points for government sector architects.
Yeah,
right?
I think yes. Thank you, Dan, for saying that you admire and respect public servants. Being one really for more than maybe for almost 4 decades really made me happy, no? When I hear that. But in government, there's really should I say, a culture of mediocrity in the bureaucracy. But there are very good people inside the bureaucracy. There are very competent people there. But I think the one thing, there are many factors that affect the performance, if you might call it the performance. These are the politics inside the bureaucracy, and I should say that the shortcomings would really be in most LGUs, because the LGUs do not have the in-house capacity. They usually do not have the in-house capacity. One for planning and design, perhaps. One who will review the plans. One who will approve the plans, for example. And perhaps the architects are outnumbered in the bureaucracy. In NHA alone, when I was there are, for example, there are 80 architects all over the country, but there are 250 engineers. No, I'm not saying they're bad, no, but there must be a balance of because I do not want to go into that argument again against the civil engineers, no, but we must respect the expertise, no, and the discipline of each of the professions, no, and maybe that's also one reason why there is a culture of mediocrity, because people are made to perform functions that are not really who are not really capable of doing that function, no? For example, the review of plans, no? And for example, the fire code, no? I also experienced that in the Bureau of Fire, for example, when you go to one location or one office, they would say a different matter from another office, no? You say you go to this, for example, in one city, and then you go to another city, they have different interpretations of the fire code. So what is lacking perhaps is a training and values formation perhaps for public servants, no? But having said that, there is an government code of ethics, no? But rather, I would say it's again the implementation. You would note also, you have said it yourself, that there are many good laws, no, and guidelines that are present, better than other countries, but we lack the implementation of these laws. So what do we do about it? I have no ready answer for that.
Yeah, maybe I'll shoot this to Architect Boy, because there's implementation and there's also the lack of punishment or penalty for people who do not follow. What do you think is the best way we can begin to look at sanctions and violations for not only for foreign architects who practice here, but for local architects who practice here and violate everything in sight?
It really has to start with us. So we cannot expect the government to do the policing for us. It really has to be with the organization and with the individual practitioners. So if you violate the law, especially the building code, that is a very conscious decision. So you're doing that purposefully. So you're doing that deliberately. And there's no excuse.
Deliberate violation, right?
That is right. And there's no excuse for that. You're a professional. You're being entrusted to do something, and they expect you to do something like that, to follow the law. And then you're the very first one violating the law, and you should be held accountable. No?
But what happens when they say, Architect Boy, sorry, hindi ko alam, ignorance of the law?
That's even worse. So you can actually be sued for malpractice by not knowing what you're supposed to know. Remember, we're always advertising the building code as our second Bible of practice. The term Bible of practice was first coined by Senator Pimentel when he was working on drafting that law, 9266. He always referred to our laws, the professional regulatory law of architects, as the first Bible of practice of architects. No? So, but he was referring to other Bibles of practice. No? So the building code is number 2 on my list. So if you do not know the contents of the building code, that's going to create a lot of difficulties for you as a practitioner, because that's something you have to know by heart.
Okay, thank you. Then for Edson again, one of the things you mentioned, which I thought was really galing, was not everyone can be star architects. You said that everybody has to kind of pick their path towards architecture, right? And this would also be for Peach and for everybody else. But you know, what's interesting is people are trained to become the architect. You walk in, architect is God, architect can do whatever. That's the stigma or the reputation of the profession. How do you make it work, and how do you manage it when people get really, I guess, depressed because they find out that they're not either in the position to be a star architect, right? And how do you make them feel that what they're doing and the background is just as important as, you know, as what the frontliners are doing? And how do you begin to change? Because I know that from my students, the big realization is that, oh, wait a minute, I can't, you know, if I'm working for a firm, I can't design the big stuff, right? And so that kind of the letdown of the profession. And how do you work that with your staff and your students? And this is also for Peach down the road, because I'm assuming that you guys are developing teams that you're empowering your teams to actually make decisions in terms of your offices.
I think it's not. I think it's just not about setting expectations. I mean, that's part of it, right? Like setting up the expectation of who the architect is and and what does it mean to be an architect. I've heard this also many times that, you know, for example, like some parents are also very sad or very disappointed that let's say their kid, you know, yung anak nila ay, you know, they don't become a licensed architect, or that they don't become an architect, and they're very disappointed. And of course, like, you know, the student also feels bad because, you know, they think that they feel like they're a failure. I think that's something that, again, as an educator, right? Like I see the big role that even just in our schools, you know, I think there has to be a shift and also a change to expand our ideas of what it means to be an architect, and what it means to practice architecture. Now, let me also then distinguish that for a moment, right? If it's about architect as having the title and the license versus the practice of architecture, right? I mean, there's I'm distinguishing it and maybe separating it a bit because then my example is, for example, a farmer who builds his own house, for example, wala siyang lisensya. Does it mean that he's not an architect because he's not practicing? Because he's building his house, he's practicing architecture, but he might not have a license. So does that preclude in the definition of what is architecture, right? And so there's kind of like these distinctions, and I think that's also part of what has become very complex, is that then the practice of architecture is complex, and that there are actually multiple specializations and a whole lot of learning that is needed. And so because of its complexity, then we cannot rely just on one person anymore, right? And the practice of it is that then you are working with other consultants. So ibig sabihin, hindi lang naman isang tao ang pag-practice ng architecture. And I think that's part of, and I can tell that sometimes it's coming from, let's say, how we teach architecture. So for example, if we study history of architecture, we always say like, oh, you know, look at Frank Lloyd Wright, you know, look at Frank Gehry, look at for one, you know, like we're only celebrating men, you know. We're not even celebrating women architects, you know. So bakit ganon, right? So that's one kind of like one of my commentary. Another one is like, as if like kunyari si Frank Lloyd Wright is like parang siya lang ang nag-create nitong lahat ng ano, but that's not true, you know. And because if we're teaching that even in schools, doon pa lang na parang, so we feel like, kailangan tayo maging Frank Lloyd Wright, o kailangan tayo maging you know, Frank Gehry or whatever, you know, these and that then somehow if we don't measure up or hindi natin na-achieve yun, somehow we're a failure. And I think that's the mindset that we need to change, right? What does it mean to be a successful architect? And what does it mean to be an architect? I think we need to expand it, you know, that there are many kind of ways of doing it. And And so then we, as a student, for example, palang sa school, we are already able to also see like, maybe I can go into this path. I can maybe go into this path, right? Right now, to be honest, like, you know, I don't think necessarily our education really prepares us to have that kind of mindset. So it's something I think that we need to solve also at the educational level, with our schools.
All right.
Thank you. Ria, you?
So I actually wanted to ask Architect Peach also on that note. So you mentioned earlier, Architect Edson, that there are a lot of complexities when it comes to the education of architecture. So as you mentioned earlier, even farmers, so they can build their own homes, and would that be considered malpractice? So how about you, Architect Peach? So what has been your experience with the practice of architecture? And for example, right now in the Philippines, I think Architect Ali mentioned in his paper before that that because of WTO GATS, there will be a freer trade in architectural services in between countries. So what does that mean for our local architects in terms of their practice?
I agree with Edson. First, the architecture people need to understand what an architect really means. I always ask my staff, if you're here because architecture is just a job, then you're in the wrong office. Because for me, architecture is who you are as a person. And so if you understand, first of all, if you understand the essence of architecture, of being an architect, then monetary success is not even an issue. Because you can be successful as an architect when you understand what it really means. And I also tell them that you cannot be a good architect if you're not a good person, because your work entails affecting the environment, the community, the people, not just the people that are going to use your creation, but the people that are going to see it, to feel it, to smell it, to everything. And so, as far as I go back to mindset and pride, because if you understand what an architect really is, and you become one, then nandun na yung pride. The pride will be there, di ba? And the professionalism will be there, and you will claim right to everything that you create. So unless you understand what it means to be an architect, if being an architect means having a living, having a job, I think it's the wrong premise. Maybe mali ako, but it's worked for me, and that's the basis of my mentoring. Is part of it is understanding yourself. Do you have what it takes to be an architect, or are you willing to give up, things to be an architect? Because it's not easy. Architecture is not easy. So, if you want an easy life, sabi nga ni Sarah Hadid, di ba? If you want an easy life, don't be an architect. Because it is a lot of responsibility. A moral responsibility, professional, emotional, diba? Everything. So I think yon mindset. I don't know how we can change the mindset, but with me naman, I just try one person at a time. Yan, that's my thing is you cannot be a good architect if you're not a good person. If you cannot consider the others beyond your pride, ego, then what's the use? Diba? What's the use? So that's my thing. I also tell them that, the world will always look for talent. The world will always look for somebody who's willing to give more than the next person. The cream will always always settle on top. So you work on being the cream. But you cannot be the cream if you don't understand what it takes to be the cream. So yun ang mindset.
Yes.
Okay, Ria?
All right. So actually, we're around 15 minutes before we end. So I'd like to end by asking all of our panelists this one question, including you, Architect Dan. With all of...
Actually, I'd also have another question. After you have one more question for everybody also. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. Perhaps you can extend a bit. All right. So if you can sum the discussion up in one word, what do you think needs to shift, particularly in the niches of architecture, of the practice of architecture that you're in, whether that's in the academe or working on international projects or design consultancies? So what do you think needs to change for us to be competitive with, for example, foreign architects eventually will be freely coming into the Philippines as more and more people are advocating for the free trade of services, and with the MRAs, for example, of the ASEAN and APEC. So what do you think needs to change?
Can I start?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so since you're asking me a question, mine is simple. It comes from Architect Boy, where we say we have to know the laws and we have to be aware of exactly where we are. And from Beth, it's like character, building character, even if you're in government service, right? And that's part of the things that we are. From Edison, it's basically education and making sure that we can look at multiple paths. And from Peach, which is on my favorite, Peach, this is not a suck up, but pride. Simply put, pride in what we do and pride in the work that we do and pride in empowering the people in our offices. So that's, but I have another question for everybody, but let's go back to Ria's question too. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you so much, Dan. Perhaps you can go around. So how about you, Architect Beth? What are your thoughts on what needs to change?
Those are mine. So I just stole everybody else's. So
Yeah,
Dan already summarized it.
Yeah, he did. He summarized everything for us. No, but I think personally, it's really commitment. No, to your commitment to do what is right. No, commitment to be excellent in everything you do. No, it's the commitment, because commitment to do what you think is right and to be competent and to excel is your gateway to what? Competence and excellence. Your commitment is there. You will do everything, no, to make things right. So I think that's it. And I really love all the things that were discussed here by our panelists, like expanding the horizons of architects to become more flexible, like what Edison was saying. And Architect Peach naman is a very good friend of mine, who's really an idol. He's really an architect's architect, no? So, yan, ang galing mo, Peach, you get everything, you sum it up so nicely. And Architect Ali, you're the expert on the laws, and I believe you're needed in this, you're very much needed in this profession. So, yon. And Dan, napakaganda nung summary mo.
Magnanakaw lang, so I don't have to...
Thank you.
All right. How about you, Architect Peach?
I think it's humility. Humility to recognize your weakness and to find ways to overcome it. Kasi if you're so yabang na hindi magaling na ako, then you will never get forward, get beyond, and see your potential, diba? So you have to I think you have to be humble enough to accept your weakness so that you can overcome it.
All right. Thank you so much, Architect Peach. Another nice quote to borrow from Architect Peach. All right. Next is Architect Edson. What do you need? What do you think needs to shift, sir?
I'd like to add to what Dan already said about the education. I think it's important, and I think the other part also is that we need to really develop our critical thinking skills. We need to be critical thinkers because that's what to be competitive means that we need to be critical thinkers. We may not know everything, as Peach had said. There's a humility that you have to accept of what you don't know, and at the same time, we need to also then be critical and not just say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. We need to really be independent thinkers, and we need to be critical thinkers of what we know and of what we don't know. And that's part of expanding our education.
All right. Thank you, Architect Edson. Yeah, so we need to expand our thinking. Okay, so how about you, Architect Ali?
Thank you. Let me start off by saying I really like a lot of what I'm hearing, especially from Peach. So magaganda yung sinabi ni Peach this evening. Yeah. And for me, in order for us to really be competitive, globally competitive, we have to heighten our consciousness about our professional responsibilities and also our civil liabilities. No? So once you sign a contract as an architect, a lot of things are attached. No? You may not know it, but you're actually risking your entire fortune by signing an architectural service contract. So it's not an easy thing to just go into a contract situation and not think about what can happen next. No? So remember that in the case of the Philippines, there are two things an architect always has to worry about. That's professional responsibility and civil liability. In other countries, it's pretty much the same. That is why they have professional liability insurance, like let's say for errors and omissions. No? That is not yet an established practice in the Philippines, but with globalization, it's going to come to our shores pretty soon. So we will have professional liability insurance already here. I think one or two companies are already offering it for Filipino architects.
Yeah, we have that in the office.
Yeah, but it's going to happen at a much wider and over a large number of architects will really have to start taking in PLI. But one thing that I also would like to say is that we have to be mature enough to accept criticism. Sa Pilipinas, wala tayong architectural critiquing. So, just anything goes. So, kahit ano yung gustong gawin, pwede na. There's no one critiquing anything because probably people are afraid na they may be called out for saying something unethical. But critiquing is part of architectural work. No? So, we really need to look into that sometime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Architect Ali.
I have one more question, and this is the fault of Titus, right? Since he made me co-moderator, I figured there are questions I can ask that I don't have to answer, right? So this is for everybody. Please fill in the blank. Given the fact that everybody in the panel are in different stages of their architectural careers, different ages, different experiences, can you just maybe answer the question, I am an architect because? Beth.
Nag-iisip pa ako eh.
Okay. Anybody else wants to jump in? And I think it'll be good for the people listening. It's because, we all our opinions change on why we want to become architects from the beginning when we're studying to where we are today. So I think everybody will benefit. And remember, I don't have to answer this question kasi medyo mahirap, right? But I am an architect because.
Sige, nakaisip na ako.
Okay.
I am an architect because I want to help people live in sustainable places.
Okay.
Nice answer,
Yay.
ma'am.
Okay, Peach?
I'm an
Sir Boy,
architect
you have time to think pa. You're the last.
I'm an architect because it's my destiny.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Miss Universe yan, di ba? Edson?
For me, I'm an architect because I want to be an instrument of change.
Very nice. And Architect Boy?
I don't want to answer that question because I became an architect because I did not get to become what I wanted to be in the first place. I really wanted to go into law, but it was martial law. So what was a lawyer going to do? So, but since I'm a product of a technical school in high school, so Peach's cousin is my batchmate. So I took up 4 years of drafting. That means architectural and mechanical drafting, and I had to probably naturally gravitate towards something close to what I took in high school. But it's really my second choice.
But it's interesting that you gravitate towards the law side of architecture.
Well, actually, right now, actually for the last two decades, I've been a construction arbitrator.
Wow, okay.
A construction arbitrator is a special judge for construction cases. So I did not really know what I was going into back in 2001 until a judge explained it to me that what I was getting into was to become a special judge for construction cases. So probably in a roundabout way, I got to become what I wanted to be in the first place. But this time, I also needed my architectural training for that job. So I was able to.
That was, yeah.
Marry two worlds. Yeah.
Who mentioned that? Peach Destiny, right? Okay, that's it for me. Maria, your show.
All right. Can I answer that also, Architect Dan?
Sure.
So, I'm an architect, definitely not for the money.
Okay. Which is good.
Okay.
Except that's, the money will come if you have fun.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Beth,
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. All right. Thank you so much, Architect Dan, for moderating this event. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry.
Maraming salamat.
For President Titus, maybe the next one should be on arbitration and from Architect Boy. Maybe we should do a specific topic just on construction arbitration.
I like that.
Okay.
By the way, arbitration. Sorry, arbitration is not just about construction. It can also be for professional services. We've handled several cases concerning consulting service contracts by architects and engineers. So,
okay.
But what one good thing about arbitration is that you don't have to wait long. A decision is out in 6 months' time. So you don't have to wait 10 years or 12 years for a lower court decision.
So, it's a susunod na kabanata, right, President Titus?
Yes.
In our next session, sponsor. All right. Thank you very much again, Architect Dan, Architect Beth, Architect Peach, Architect Edson, and Architect Ali. All right. We're very blessed to have you tonight.
I bet.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Edson. Thank you.
Edson, I'll see you in New Orleans.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Raya. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So, such an amazing time with all of our wonderful guests. And ang dami ko pong natutunan. And I was opened up to a lot of different opinions. Not only on globalization, but even with our practice as a whole. So how do we improve ourselves within the context of globalization, but also personally? Kasi I think that was one of the recurring themes that we in order to be competitive, we have to start with ourselves. Ayan. So Before we take our last cheers of the night, again, thank you very much to our dear panelists, first of all, and also to our dear sponsors, Davies Paints, Multi-Rich Home Decor, and Koisen. So remember, once again, to comment your favorite drink below for a chance to win a power bank, and share this video for a chance to win a laptop bag. So now, before we end, let's take a short break. So don't go anywhere.
Are you ready for your next DIY paint project? Today, Davis Paints will show you how to visualize your color schemes using Davis color discs. The perfect tool for professional designers, the Davis color discs allows you to create and compare the right color combinations for your color scheme needs. 1. Select 2 color discs and slide them together. 2. Select another color disc and slide it under the first. 3. Rotate, compare, and match up until you find the combination that's right for you. You can slide in up to 7 color discs to study and compare your desired color scheme. The Davis color disc is available in all DIY stores near you. If you want more ideas on how to choose the perfect color for your own living space, like and subscribe to our pages, or visit our website at www.davispaints.com.
All right, so we're back again. Again, thank you to our dear panelists and to our sponsors. So once again, please don't miss our special event this coming November 27 as we celebrate the Makati chapter's 44th founding anniversary and new members induction ceremony. So this is featuring architect Jojo Tolentino and architect Robert Sa. Ayan. So this is for a total of 2 CPD points. So make sure to register. And again, we'd like to thank our sponsors for today, Davies Paints, Multi-Rich Home Decors, and Koisen. So I really hope everyone enjoyed tonight. If you did, please don't forget to like our Facebook page, the United Architects of the Philippines Makati Chapter. For the likers and sharers, the winners of our prizes, which is 4 power banks and 8 laptop bags, will be announced in the UAP MC Facebook page. So, ayan, abangan na lang po natin yan. Also, ayan, so you may post a selfie tonight with hashtag happy with UAPMC. Ayan, so with that, again, this is Raya Zamudio, your BOD kakwentuhan. We'll see you again in the next episode of Arquivivo Happy Hour. So cheers!
yellow, na parang yellow nung time ni Cory, pero mas dark ng konti. Parang yolk ng itlog na malapit sa kulay nung Big Bird, pero hindi ganong kapusyaw. Yun! Yun yung gusto ko para sa sala ko.
Everyone has a favorite color. We have over 1,000 to choose from. Davies Paints. Tunay na makulay.
Davis Sun and Rain Elastomeric Paint. Nababanat sa init, bumabalik sa lamig. 100% acrylic, di basta kumukupas. Marami pang kulay na mapagpipilian. Davis Sun and Rain. Para sa akin, ang bossing sa Elastomeric Paint. Basta pintura, hanapin ang tatak Davis.